The evening felt like any other, warm and familiar. I had planned a quiet dinner with my husband, Adam, and his best friend, Mark, who had been in our lives for years. It was supposed to be a simple, relaxing evening. Good food, a few glasses of wine, and conversation about life. I had no idea that it would turn into something that would haunt me forever. Adam and Mark had always shared a deep bond, a friendship that seemed unshakable. I always appreciated their closeness, though at times I wondered if it kept me at a distance. It wasn't anything overt, just subtle moments when Adam would get lost in conversations with Mark, leaving me feeling like an outsider in my own home. But I brushed it off, chalking it up to their shared history and camaraderie. After all, what harm could there be in a friendship that had lasted for so long? As I laid out the dinner on the table, I glanced over at Adam, who was absorbed in setting up the music. Mark had arrived a little earlier, and they had already shared a laugh over something trivial. It made me smile to see them so at ease. The evening began without a hitch. We ate, drank, and talked about mundane things, work, travel plans, random memories. The usual. But as the evening wore on, I started to notice something odd. There was a tension in the air, an undercurrent of discomfort that I couldn't quite place. Adam's eyes flicked to his phone more often than usual. He'd glance at the screen, then back at Mark, but there was something in his demeanor that felt off, distant, preoccupied. It wasn't that he was being rude, but I could sense his mind wasn't fully present. And I hated to admit it, but it bothered me. We were supposed to be enjoying a night together, yet I felt increasingly like I was losing him to whatever was occupying his thoughts. Mark, on the other hand, seemed unaffected by the shift. His laughter came easily, his stories flowed without hesitation. But there was something about his energy that felt a little too eager, as though he was overcompensating for something, trying a bit too hard to keep the mood light. I couldn't quite place why, but I started to feel an odd sense of unease, as if there was something more beneath the surface of our conversation. Despite my growing discomfort, I pushed it aside. I told myself that I was being paranoid, that I was just overthinking things. After all, what reason did I have to suspect anything was wrong? Everything seemed normal on the outside. But the doubt lingered in the back of my mind, gnawing at me, growing stronger as the evening wore on. At one point, I excused myself to go to the kitchen, trying to shake off the uneasy feeling that had settled over me. When I returned, I noticed the way Mark was looking at Adam. It wasn't just friendly. It was something more, something that made my stomach churn. Their shared glance wasn't the kind of look one gives to a best friend. It was charged, loaded with an unspoken understanding. I quickly dismissed the thought, convincing myself that I was reading too much into a simple look. But the knot in my chest grew tighter. The evening continued, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Maybe it was the way Mark kept leaning in when Adam spoke, or how Adam seemed to be lost in thought when he wasn't engaging in conversation. Maybe I was being paranoid. But then, I overheard a small, careless comment from Mark that made my blood run cold. "You've been busy lately, huh?" he said to Adam, his voice casual. "But it's not like I haven't noticed." Adam's face flushed, but he quickly masked it with a chuckle, brushing it off as nothing. But my heart sank. What was Mark talking about? It wasn't just the words, it was the tone, the way he said it. There was something behind that comment, something that didn't sit right with me. I tried to push it out of my mind, but I couldn't. I had been married to Adam for 7 years, and I had never once questioned his loyalty, until now. Something in the air had shifted, and I knew deep down that I couldn't ignore it. But I wasn't ready to face what that meant yet. Not until Mark spoke again, with a slight slur in his voice, and I realized then that the words that followed would change everything. "You know, it's not like I haven't kept an eye on things," Mark said, his eyes a little too focused on me. "I mean, I've been there for both of you through thick and thin, right?" I felt a cold shiver run down my spine. There it was again, the undertone of something more. I didn't know what it was, but I could feel it now, the weight of it. Something was happening, something I couldn't ignore any longer. The calm evening I had been hoping for suddenly felt like a distant memory, and in its place was the sickening realization that I wasn't as oblivious as I had believed. The calm before the storm had just passed, and I had no idea what was coming next. I couldn't believe what Mark had just said. It wasn't a question, nor was it a joke. It was a statement, as if he had just casually confirmed something I hadn't even known was a possibility. The room fell silent, my heartbeat pounding in my ears. Adam shifted uncomfortably in his seat, his eyes darting from me to Mark, his face paling slightly. I couldn't process it at first. The words hung in the air, thick with an unsettling truth I wasn't ready to hear. Mark, clearly oblivious to the tension he had just caused, reached for his glass of wine, his movements slow and deliberate, as if he hadn't just shattered everything. Adam, on the other hand, seemed frozen, staring at Mark with an expression that I couldn't quite read. Something between guilt and defensiveness. I swallowed hard, the realization sinking in slowly, painfully. What did Mark mean by keeping an eye on things? Was he implying that he knew something? No, that wasn't possible. Adam and I had always been solid, or so I thought. The silence stretched on, too long, suffocating the conversation. I couldn't take it anymore. My voice, shaky but forceful, broke through the stillness. What do you mean by that? I demanded, the words tasting foreign in my mouth. What exactly are you talking about? Mark's eyes flickered toward Adam, and for a split second, it was like he was waiting for permission to say more. But Adam didn't speak. He just stared at his lap, his fingers gripping the edge of the table. That was enough. The knot in my stomach tightened, a sickening sensation creeping up my throat. I turned to Adam, my voice barely a whisper now. What is he talking about? Adam's lips trembled, but he still didn't say anything. It was as if his silence spoke louder than any words could have. The pit in my stomach deepened, and my breath came in shallow gasps. My mind was racing, trying to make sense of it all, but I couldn't. It didn't make sense. Adam and I had our issues. Sure, every relationship has them, but infidelity? I never thought it would be something that would touch us. Mark seemed to sense the shift in the room, and, perhaps against his better judgment, leaned forward. It wasn't always this way. Things changed, he said, his voice quieter now, almost too casual for the weight of what he was revealing. I guess I should have said something sooner, but you know how it is with friendships, right? Sometimes you don't want to be the one to rock the boat. I felt the world around me tilt, everything spinning as I tried to grasp what was happening. What changed? I whispered, almost afraid to ask, but needing to know. Mark glanced at Adam again, this time with something resembling pity in his eyes. You don't know, do you? Mark continued, his words slowly starting to sink in. I guess I can't keep pretending. Adam's been seeing someone else. For a while now. The world stopped. I froze, unable to move, unable to speak. The room felt suffocating, the walls closing in on me as I processed his words. Adam's affair. It wasn't just a suggestion anymore. It was a cold, undeniable fact. My husband, the man I trusted, had been seeing someone else. I couldn't breathe. I turned to Adam, my eyes wide with disbelief. Is this true? I asked, my voice trembling. Tell me it's not true. Adam didn't look up. He didn't say anything. The silence between us stretched painfully, and in that moment, I realized that his silence was all the answer I needed. My stomach churned, my hands shaking uncontrollably. The hurt, the betrayal, the utter disbelief. It all hit me like a wave crashing against the shore. Mark leaned back in his chair, clearly uncomfortable with the growing tension. I didn't mean for it to come out like this, he muttered, his voice almost apologetic. But you deserve to know the truth. I felt a rush of anger surge through me, my heart pounding in my chest. The truth? I repeated, my voice louder now, a sharp edge to it. You think that telling me this now is the truth? After everything? Adam still didn't speak. I turned away from him, my thoughts swirling in a whirlwind of confusion and rage. I didn't know how long we sat there in that uncomfortable silence, but it felt like hours. The betrayal was so raw, so sudden, that I couldn't wrap my head around it. How long had this been going on? Why hadn't I noticed? I turned to Mark, my eyes blazing with hurt. How long? I demanded, desperate to know how deep the lie went. How long has this been happening? Mark looked at me, his gaze softening just a little. It's been going on for months, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. I'm sorry. I should have told you sooner. Months. My mind reeled. How had I not noticed? How had I missed the signs? I had trusted Adam implicitly, and this betrayal was the last thing I ever expected. I looked at him again, my heart aching with the weight of what I had just learned. His face was a mask of guilt, but it was too late for apologies now. Too late for explanations. The damage had been done. I don't even know who you are anymore, I whispered, the tears threatening to spill over. I don't know who you've become. I couldn't look at Adam anymore. The man I had spent 7 years with, the one I had built a life with, was suddenly a stranger. My heart was beating so fast, I thought it might burst from my chest. I couldn't process it all, but I couldn't ignore it either. This wasn't just a betrayal of trust. It was a complete rupture of everything I thought we were. I needed answers. I needed to understand why. Without a word, I stood up and walked toward Adam, my steps deliberate. Mark shifted uncomfortably in his chair, glancing at Adam, but neither of them said a word. It was as if they were both waiting for the storm to hit. I was already shaking, but I didn't care. I needed to confront him, to force him to face me. Why? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper at first, but it grew louder with each word. Why would you do this to me? To us? Adam didn't answer right away. His eyes were still down, his hands fidgeting in his lap. The silence between us was suffocating. Every second felt like a lifetime, each moment stretching as I waited for him to say something. Anything, to explain the unexplainable. But he stayed silent. Mark, perhaps sensing the rising tension, finally spoke, but his voice was hesitant. Maybe it's not that simple. There's more to it than you think. I spun around to face him. Don't you dare try to justify this. I shouted, my voice cracking with emotion. You're not the one who's been lied to, who's been cheated on. You don't get to make excuses for this. Mark flinched but didn't back down. I'm not excusing it, I'm just saying that Adam didn't mean for it to get to this point. But that didn't make it better. It only made it worse. My head was spinning. This was not the man I had married. The man I had trusted. How long has this been going on? I demanded again, my voice shaking. How long has he been seeing her? And why the hell didn't you tell me? Mark shifted uncomfortably in his seat. I didn't want to hurt you. I thought Adam would come clean when the time was right. I let out a bitter laugh. The time was never right, was it? He's been hiding this from me for months. And you've been complicit in it. You're just as much a part of this as he is. Mark lowered his gaze, guilt flashing across his face. I turned back to Adam. He was still avoiding my eyes, his silence speaking volumes. I could feel the anger rising inside me, an overwhelming tidal wave that threatened to consume everything. Why didn't you tell me? I asked Adam again, my voice dangerously calm now. Why didn't you come to me? Was I so unimportant to you? Finally, Adam spoke, his voice low and strained. I didn't want to hurt you, he said, his words almost a whisper. I didn't know how to tell you. I laughed again, the sound bitter and sharp. You didn't know how? You think this is about not knowing how to tell me? No, Adam, this is about betrayal. You lied to me. You cheated on me. And you kept it from me for months. He looked up at me then, his eyes filled with something, regret maybe, but it didn't matter. It didn't matter because I couldn't unhear what I had just heard. I couldn't unfeel the crushing weight of what he had done. I'm sorry, he whispered, but it was too little too late. The apology meant nothing to me now. How could it? Sorry, I repeated, the word almost tasting like venom on my tongue. Sorry doesn't fix this. Sorry doesn't take away the lies, the trust you've shattered. There was a long pause, where the only sound in the room was the ringing in my ears. I could feel the tears starting to sting my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. I wouldn't give him the satisfaction of seeing me break down. Not here. Not now. I never wanted to hurt you, Adam said again, his voice barely audible. I didn't know how to fix it. I could barely contain my rage. Fix it? I spat. How do you fix something like this? How do you fix years of trust broken by your lies? How do you fix the fact that I don't even know who you are anymore? For the first time, I saw something in his eyes, a glimpse of the man I had married, the man I thought I knew. It was only for a moment, but it was there. It was fleeting. I don't know, he said quietly. I don't know how to fix this. I didn't want to lose you. I stepped back, my heart heavy with the weight of his words. But they didn't comfort me. They didn't make this better. All I could feel was the betrayal, the shock, the anger. The pieces of my life that were now shattered beyond repair. I don't know what to do anymore, I whispered, my voice breaking. I don't even know if I want to try and fix this. Adam's face twisted with desperation. Please don't leave me. Please, I'll do anything. But I couldn't hear him. I couldn't listen to him. My mind was already made up. There was no going back. Everything had changed in that one moment, and I couldn't undo what had been done. I don't know if I can forgive you, I said quietly, my heart heavy with the realization that everything I thought I knew was now gone. I don't even know if I want to. The silence that followed was unbearable, and I realized, in that moment, that there was nothing left to say. The weight of the silence between us was suffocating, like a heavy fog that refused to lift. I stood there, my heart a mess of conflicting emotions. Hurt, anger, confusion. My mind kept racing, asking a million questions that had no answers. How could this happen? How did we get here? And more importantly, what do I do now? Adam was still sitting there, his face pale, his eyes pleading. But I couldn't bring myself to look at him. I had trusted him, and in a single moment, everything had come crashing down. I couldn't just sweep it under the rug. I couldn't pretend like nothing had happened, not after what he'd done. Mark, still sitting quietly at the table, shifted uneasily. I could feel his eyes on me, but I didn't want to acknowledge him. It didn't matter anymore. What mattered now was what I was going to do with the shattered pieces of my life. I had always believed in the strength of our relationship, in the bond we shared. But now I saw it for what it truly was, fragile, built on lies, a foundation that crumbled the moment I found out the truth. My trust in Adam was gone, and with it, the future I had envisioned for us. I need time, I said finally, my voice barely audible. I didn't even know if Adam heard me. I needed time to think, to process what had just been revealed to me. Could I move past this? Could I ever look at him the same way again? Adam's voice cracked as he spoke, desperate. Please don't leave me. I'll do anything. I'll fix it. I'll work on us. His words sounded empty now, like a hollow promise that meant nothing. How could I believe him? How could I trust him when the man I thought I knew had been hiding this from me for so long? I shook my head, trying to push the tears back. I can't, I said, my voice growing stronger. I don't know what to do with all this, Adam. I don't even know who you are anymore. He flinched at my words, but it didn't matter. The truth was that I didn't know who he was either. The person I had loved, the person I had built my life with, was gone. And I was left standing in the ruins of what we once had. I turned away, needing to distance myself from the weight of his presence. Mark cleared his throat, but I didn't look at him. I didn't care about his apologies, his guilt. I wasn't ready to deal with him, not now. I took a deep breath, my mind a whirlwind of thoughts. I knew I couldn't make any decisions right now. Not when everything was still so raw. But what I did know was that I needed space. I needed time away from both of them to figure out who I was outside of this shattered relationship. I don't know if I can forgive you, Adam, I said quietly, my voice steady but firm. I don't know if I even want to try. Everything is broken, and I don't know if it's worth fixing. He didn't respond, and I didn't expect him to. His silence was all I needed to hear. He knew the damage had been done, and there was nothing he could say to undo it. I walked toward the door, my heart heavy with the weight of the decision I was making. I didn't know where I was going or what I was going to do, but I knew I couldn't stay in this house with the man who had betrayed me. Not now. Not when everything felt like a lie. Before I stepped out, I turned to Mark one last time. Stay out of this, Mark, I said, my voice cold. This is between me and Adam now. Don't pretend you're the good guy here. You helped him hide this from me. Mark didn't say anything, but I could see the guilt written on his face. He knew I was right, and it didn't matter anymore. I left, stepping out into the night, the cool air hitting my face like a slap of reality. I didn't know what the future held, or if I would ever be able to trust again, but in that moment, I knew I had to put myself first. I had to take control of my own life, even if it meant walking away from everything I had once believed in. The uncertainty ahead was terrifying, but it was also freeing. I didn't know where I was going, but I knew I couldn't stay. Not in this broken version of my life. Not anymore. And so, I walked away, knowing that this chapter of my life was over, and whatever came next, I would face it on my own terms.